Kiora, Aotearoa, and hello world. You are listening to the Yeah Nah podcast, the official podcast of the New Zealand Skeptics. I'm Bronwyn Rideout, and my co-hosts today are Mark Honeychurch.
Hey.
And Katrina Borthwick.
Hello.
Now, in this episode, I guess you could say we are taking you all, dragging, kicking, and screaming to church. Mark has written a couple articles in the recent newsletter about two different bad actors in America. But also joining us in this task is a very special guest. I'm pleased to introduce Jared Brandon. Jared will be fielding some of our questions about his new YouTube channel called Unholy Light, where he poses some hard questions about doubt, faith, belief, and some upcoming topics as well. Welcome to the podcast, Jared. I think this is your first visit to a recording studio, so to speak.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bronwyn, Katrina, Mark, for having me on board. So yeah, it's exciting to be here and talk a little bit about me, what I'm doing, and other things too. So yeah, it's cool to be here.
But before we hear more about your channel, Mark, I think we have a bit of a review to give about the Doomsday Comedy Show that we just saw last week.
Yeah, I suppose we should let our audience know how much fun we had. I mean, I don't know how you were, Bronwyn, but as I said in my newsletter article, I was expecting some cringe. I was expecting maybe a lot of cringe and not a lot of good comedy, but I was pleasantly surprised. How did you find it?
It was fun. I think we also picked up a couple of other people that we're going to try to invite onto the podcast. It was good. I think the comedy show was actually pretty thought-provoking because I think we were kind of picking up things from other people. Even when the jokes sometimes fell flat, as they kind of do in these comedy shows, there's actually still something rich that you could talk about.
Yeah, and the breadth of the organizations that were being talked about. So we did have the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons being covered, but also Alcoholics Anonymous and Steiner, which is primary schools, which you wouldn't think primary schools could be culty at all. But of course, when it comes to Rudolf Steiner, very culty and very weird.
Oddly, even though it's Steiner, it's still very Christchurch to talk about where you went to high school.
Yep, and then the ex-bishop of Wellington for the Mormons was the Mormon speaker, which I thought was interesting.
He also had some pretty interesting jokes, and it's just, I'm so curious because his opening bit was, how Mormon was I? And yeah, he was pretty Mormon. So how he went from being the Bishop of Wellington, so to speak, and a lot of those jobs actually are unpaid. So I think they sound very impressive, like to be a leader in the Mormon church. But if you're just doing ward or stake level stuff, you know, you're not really getting paid. It's kind of a lot of volunteer work that you have to do on top of your day-to-day job. So I'm interested, to go from a role where you probably had a lot of power locally to just sort of putting it all aside. Kind of interested in that story.
I went to the Auckland one, the Doomsday, because they travelled, I think it's Jonas, who's from, I can't remember. Norway. Yeah, so I went to the Auckland one just after Jehovah's protest that I was at. I think my takeaway was, I mean, I haven't been a Christian for like 10 years and I'm well recovered, but it's kind of like subtle, like just a little bit of almost healing, just to laugh at how awful religion can be sometimes and just make just the most crudest jokes and just know that you're on the other side. It was about 30 people that turned up. And it was great. It was kind of full house for the small place we were in. So
nice.
It was good.
Yeah, I think for those people that have been in a religion and come out, the more culty it is, the more they seem to band together and find each other afterwards. I guess there's been so much emotional damage that, as you say, just talking about it, laughing about it, it's probably really good for them. And I've been to a Jehovah's Witnesses pub afternoon before where they all just got into a pub and, had a good laugh. But they had a good laugh while talking about sexual abuse and things like this. They were trying to make light of it and just talk over it with friends, but what was underlying it was just so horrific for some of them.
After the protest, because they had the big convention, the Jehovah's Witness convention in Auckland, like 20,000 people at Eden Park. And so after I filmed the protest for 2 hours, I just put my camera in the car and I went in and just sat there for an hour and listened to it all. They watched me like a hawk. I got stopped like 6 times. Like, who are you? Because I didn't have the lanyard and I wasn't dressed up like the Jehovah's. But they were like, is this a Trojan horse? And they wouldn't let me take photos or nothing. Everyone else was taking photos and they just followed me around. So I thoroughly enjoyed being a stone in their shoe. It was good. So.
Oh, interesting. I've been to the local convention here in Wellington. They normally hold it in Porora. And just sitting down and listening to the talks, because as you say, this year we were the hosts of the international convention. But what happens for every other country is that the Jehovah's Witnesses will book out a place and they will show recordings of the talks that have been given this year in Auckland. And so you can sit there and listen to them. And A lot of it, I think especially on the second day, ends up talking about basically the end of the world. It's what the Jehovah's Witnesses are waiting for, and they're trying to discern which bits of revelation connect to which bits of politics. Like, is Putin the king from the north, or is it Trump? And how far are they from bringing the downfall of man? And they're trying to connect all these world events, and it just feels depressing, but they all seem to be really excited about it. Like, when the end of the world comes, everybody gets killed, as Jonah said in his comedy. Everybody gets killed basically by Jesus, except for the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they get to survive and live on. And it's weird.
I just wonder if they've thought this through, because I know I had a flatmate. She was unemployed and had the Jehovah's Witness knock on the door, and the lady came in and they were talking, and she said, well, then everyone will just kind of die. So, oh, okay. But what about the children? Oh, there won't be any children. And she's like, I don't think I want to live in a world without children. And the Jehovah's Witness person was a bit like, oh. And so there's this whole thing, like, I don't think, if most of the population, the earth disappearing is actually, I don't think they've thought it through and what that means.
No, there is a point where apparently the earth becomes really good, because the trouble that JWs have is that they've promised heaven to only 144,000. So beyond that, everybody else inherits a new earth. So I've sat in on their annual memorial service where they talk about how amazing the earth is going to be. It's not going to be like the earth now. God is going to clean it up and make it perfect, so plants grow really easily, so that, you can tend your garden without too much trouble. And the animals aren't going to fight. They're all going to get on with each other and things like this. So they're making it up. None of this really, like the lion will lay with the lamb, like one verse in the Bible is their basis for saying that all these animals are going to get on well together. It's wishful thinking, but it's only a second prize. Like the JWs alive today, they don't go to heaven anymore. This earth is definitely the consolation prize for them.
Get any kind of infrastructure with 144,000 people. They'll be living in paddocks, I don't even think they'll have paddocks. They don't have enough people to chop trees,
Yeah, well, maybe one of them's a nuclear scientist and can keep all the nuclear power stations going.
They probably need all of the people to keep the one.
I grew up in a Christian home, and I was Christian growing up. And I was going through puberty, and there was this guy, Barry Smith, who was this New Zealand prophetic end of the world type, just pushing this end of the world. And we all legitimately thought like end of the world was in the next few years. It was so close. And I was like, as a teenage guy, just gone through puberty, I was like, no, because I need to get married first so that I can have sex. I was like, please, God, just wait until I can get married. I can have sex, and then you can end the world. And that was just the biggest, most important thing for me.
Bronwyn, Barry Smith, I'm trying to think, have you written about him?
Yeah, he was mentioned in Rebecca Priestley's book End Times, because she sort of was exposed to him when she was a teenager. But yeah, definitely. He was popular, but not just in New Zealand, but he traveled to Australia. He traveled to the UK. I'm not sure how much he did in the US, but he's on videos. He had a very distinctive look to him. He wore a trench coat, like a half trench coat or something. Always had the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. But he wrote like lots of books. Like a lot of his books are actually kept at the National Library. But the same message keeps on coming through. Very fearful about having a national register, like, your NHI or your IRD number,
One world
the mark of the beast.
Right.
But also, very pro-Israel, and, how evangelical Christians are very interested in Israel because of what that means for the end time prophecy. I think you've just kind of given us sort of a natural segue to sort of talk about your YouTube channel. So, Mark, why don't you tell us, how you know Jared and came across the videos?
Late one night in a bar, we bumped into each other. No, none of that. So basically, I've been a member of the NZARH Council for, maybe nearly 10 years now. And Jared, do you remember what year you joined the council to help run the NZARH?
Yeah, well, I lost my faith in end of 2015, and then it was within a year from that I joined the council. So it would have been in 2016 sometime.
Okay. Oh, wow. So geez.
Yeah.
That was 10 years ago. Okay. So, yeah, for those listening that don't know my acronym, the NZARH is the New Zealand Association of Rationalists and Humanists. So the rationalist bit is kind of informally seen more as like fighting for pro-secularism and against religion. And then the humanism part is about how you can live an ethical life without needing a set of rules from God. And I would argue that you can lead a much more ethical life not having those rules from God. Jared and I think, was it a couple of years that you were on on the council?
Yeah, I was there for 2 or 3 years. I think we were on the board together, and you were down Wellington, so lots of video calls.
Yeah. So we spent a few years working together trying to decide what the NZARH was going to do, and a lot of it's just looking after the building, an aging building that's a bit of trouble. But you eventually decided to go off and focus on other things. At the time, did you have in your mind that a YouTube channel would be something you wanted to do?
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home and was a happy Christian my whole life going through university. I studied science at university, happy Christian. And it wasn't until I was about 26, 27 when I started to think about, I read a book on, maybe evolution is actually true, written by a Christian. And it took like 6 years to deconvert, to be honest. And it was a struggle, and I kind of tried to hold on to my faith as much as I could. But eventually when I was 32, I let go of my faith. And at that time I was like, so that's 10 years ago now, I was like, I need to tell the world what I've learned and what I've seen, and I feel I've got something to share. It took me 10 years to make a YouTube channel. I could have got a lot more momentum if I started 10 years ago, but at the same time, I'm someone that doesn't like to just share opinions without really doing my research and really knowing it. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but just someone who's done enough research that I can back things up, and I'm not just some keyboard warrior. I went down a bit of a philosophical rabbit hole and just really wanted to ground my arguments and dig deeper. And so it was actually really nice for 10 years. And it's funny because I work for myself. I'm a videographer, self-employed. And so I spent probably, for the majority of that 10 years, probably more time in study and writing and thinking than I did at my job. I love it. I love learning and asking hard questions. And it was 10 years, but I feel like my thoughts have matured and I kind of understand it better. And I feel like I know what I want to say more now, as opposed to just repeating classic fine-tuning evolution arguments that have been talked to death forever. And I feel like I've got a few other things I can say that might contribute a bit more. So yeah, that's kind of briefly like how I come to now.
So for me, I stopped being a Christian about 20 years ago. And I would say, like, if I tried to do anything active for those first few years, I don't think it would have gone well. Like, I think I had something to prove when I first became an atheist. I wanted to prove that I was right. It's like, no, because, a lot of people that were around me at the time, especially kind of extended family, they're Christian, and suddenly I buck the trend and I'm saying I don't believe anymore. And I felt like I had to justify myself. I felt like I needed to give the receipts. I needed to give some evidence. And so I was insufferable for a while, especially for my wife, who was still a Christian, who had to listen to me almost like it was my internal argument, but it became external and ended up being an argument with her. And over time, I guess I've mellowed a lot. I'm still fairly strident in my beliefs, but I don't feel a need to have an argument all the time. And I'm quite happy going into a church and just sitting there and listening quietly and not needing to make a scene or anything like that. So I could imagine that leaving it that 10 years and like working on it and refining yourself and your thoughts is probably a very good thing. And that if you'd made YouTube videos 10 years ago, it would have been a pretty different thing as well. But I mean, like with the videos, obviously there's a couple of things that are going into them that are taking a lot of time. As you say, the research and the work and the thinking about things logically on your topics, which is, you've talked about faith and doubt. But the other thing is the videography. As you say, you're a videographer, but you must be putting a lot of work into these because they look like really professional videos. How is that going? How long does it take to do a video? And can you run us through just quickly a little bit about like what's your process for making one of these?
Yeah. So I've been a professional videographer for like 18 years or something. So I film weddings predominantly, and I do commercial work as well. So I have all of the gear and I know how to do it, and I know how to be interesting and tell a story and just not blabble for ages and start strongly, etc. I'm kind of in some sense hitting the ground running, which is good. How long does it take me to do a video is really hard to answer. Sometimes, like thinking about, for example, my first 3 videos are around faith and doubt, as you said, but it took me years to figure out exactly how to understand faith, because it's an incredibly deep and rich and incredibly interesting word. It's just so much deeper than just trust in a belief or whatever you want to say. So it took me years to, come to understand what I wanted to say. But then actually writing each one, like I've given myself 3 weeks to get a new video out. And so I suppose I'm going to take 3 weeks to get each video out. Like, you'll always work as long as your deadline is. Each script is maybe 5,000 words. It's about a half-hour video. I'll go through 3 or 4 or 5 versions of it until I really find exactly what I need to say and nothing more. It can take maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days of writing, and then obviously with ChatGPT to refine it and just make my points land, and then research. I have to write it out myself first because I've got to get the thoughts out of my head, right? And into the computer. I can't just say, ChatGPT, write an argument about this, because it'll just be generic and boring. So yeah, and then like, I think for the first video, I think I did like 4 failed attempts of, I'd record myself and I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like a lecture. It's so boring. And I'd do it again and I'd do it again and I'd do it again. Until I kind of felt like there was something that I was real happy with. So the first episode took ages to shoot. But even though I've been a videographer, it's a new genre of filmmaking and storytelling for me. And it just takes a while to get your head around how you want to say it and what's interesting, what's actually not interesting, etc. So, but to be honest, each episode at the moment might take 10 days. And even just creating a thumbnail takes a day, honestly, if you want to make a good thumbnail and title and photographing and going into Photoshop and all of that. So it's taken me a while, but I love it to be my full-time job and I'm treating it as such pretty much. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but I'd rather make one video that gets 100,000 views than 10 videos that get 10,000 views. Do you know what I mean? And so that's kind of how I see it, as I just want to go all in on each video. And it's, it starts slowly, but these are evergreen videos. They'll be around forever. So they'll get views for the next 5-10 years easy. So I'm happy to start slow and just build momentum from here.
I really like your angle, and that it's not just why God exists, why it doesn't exist. It's these are the arguments that will be thrown at you that kind of break your brain, and this is why they're silly. And I think it's like, oh gosh, that's the thing that's been bugging me in terms of you get it and you're like, so I think you nailed the explanation of the sort of internal reference and that kind of stuff. Is like the logic is based on, the premise that is completely made up.
Oh, you're talking about the castle in the sky analogy?
Yeah, and even
yeah.
in the faith section, there's a bit of that going on as well. It's like, hang on a minute, you've got this construct that you don't even know what it is. You can't agree. And it tends to change depending on how people are. So when you're trying to bring people in, there's a different definition than when they've landed in your door and now they're trapped, and suddenly faith becomes, less credible in terms of what it is.
Yeah, something that's been interesting for me is just learning how to develop an argument really succinctly. And some of these topics in faith is really tricky. I've got a video coming up on like, do you have faith in a textbook, right? A science textbook. And yeah, you trust the textbook. You don't research everything yourself. And then I put in my head, well, can I also take the same faith in that textbook and put it in another textbook, the Bible? It's full of text. Can I just have faith in that? And in my head, I was like, I couldn't answer that question straight away. And I knew I couldn't. Like, you can't, it's a different kind of faith. But it took me a while to figure out and reverse engineer it and be able to articulate why they're different types of faith. You can trust something over here. It doesn't mean you can trust a different book over there. And it just takes a long time to figure out how to articulate and communicate it to someone. And I want to do it effectively. It's real passionate for me is to reach a popular level and not get too jargony and too over people's heads. I really want to communicate to anyone could watch my videos and understand them, and just real simple concepts. And so that's kind of, I'm passionate about that as well. So yeah.
In the first video I watched, you include clips from Cyril MacArthur. Within your original religious education and belief, those American figures, were they quite prominent in your New Zealand religious background?
Yeah. I mean, I was in a Pentecostal kind of evangelical background, like grew up kind of Assemblies of God. And I remember it was been in the 90s, perhaps. There was some big revivals in America, the Brownsville revival, I think it was. I can't remember. There's a few of them where the Holy Spirit just lands for a couple of years and it just, the church grows rapidly, and that's, what it's claimed to be. But then Mum and Dad would watch Kenneth Copeland in the morning at 6 a.m. and record them all on their hard drive recorders, and the Voice of Victory, I can't remember what it's called. So American Christianity did definitely have an influence, which is a bit more fundamental perhaps. For sure. And so I suppose like these people, I'm familiar with them, but at the same time, you got to find clips on YouTube as well. It doesn't really work to just have I don't know. It's just, it's if I'm on YouTube, I have to find clips. So I research on YouTube, what is faith, and just read as much as I can, download as much video as I can, and find sections that are relevant to what I feel is true Christianity that a lot of Christians believe, if I could say that.
There's a lot of clips of Kenneth Copeland out there, but they are his more memey stuff, like where he's acting a little bit foolish, like the clip where a female reporter, she's trying to talk to him about his private jet, and he just is being quite the fool. Yeah. But it is harder to find the more serious, the longer clips of that, where they're actually talking about their doxology and stuff.
Absolutely, and it's real important for me, like, life is short, and I don't want to muck around just making fun of someone or taking someone out of context. Like, I really, obviously no one's going to have a perfect set of beliefs in their head, and some of the beliefs that I have in my head are going to be wrong, so I can't, I'm open to being corrected on a whole bunch of stuff. But I've lost my train of thought. I want to try and understand Christianity at its very best, and so I'll see a video and I'm not just going to cut out a little bit out of context that's clearly not what they meant to say. Sometimes I watch a whole sermon, but hey, just checking that I'm capturing them in a fair way. I want to progress the discussion. I'm sure there's things that atheists have got wrong, their beliefs about Christianity and vice versa. And I kind of want to lift the level of discussion for everyone, to be honest, so we can have more interesting and relevant and just productive debates and conversation than just strawmanning each other and attacking each other's most cringe Kenneth Copeland versions. I was like, we can do better than that, It must be hard to figure out what you do want to feature in your videos as things to go after, because I think, as you mentioned in one of your videos, like, sometimes the difference between what pastors and leaders are saying and then what the average parishioner believes, that there can be a chasm between the two. And it sounds like you're trying to be very wary of not going after straw men. It's like, no, this is a belief that is very commonplace in Christianity. But sometimes the leadership will swear blind that this isn't what we believe, but actually the rank and file sometimes have these very different ideas. Yeah, and like, it's almost impossible to steelman Christianity or talk about Christianity as it actually is, because there's so many different denominations, right? And so you can challenge, you can use one preacher and accurately capture who he is, and the comments online will be like, that's not true Christianity, and you can never win because there's so many different versions of Christianity. So I just got to do my best. And like, maybe I'm challenging certain views of Christianity and not others, and that's fine. To be honest, like, I just want to get to truth anyway. Like, I don't really care about who's correct, to be honest. Like, yeah, I'm an atheist, but that's not really what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about pursuing truth, It just happens to be that atheism is best captures what I believe.
So inevitably you have that little line thrown back at you that religion is a source of comfort for people and it gives them purpose and meaning to their life, I guess. And what if there's the off chance that, this is real, and then you've got that whole Pascal's wager thing, where if there's a remote chance it's real, then you don't want to take the gamble and not go to church and end up in eternal damnation or something. Like, there's this whole thing, but then there are some things that come out of religion that are not cool and not good for people. So I guess, where do you kind of land in that sort of space?
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with someone maybe about a month ago on that. And I think Richard Dawkins did something famous on, like, what if I'm wrong? Someone asked him, what if you're wrong? And he gave a certain reply. I'd say it a bit differently. Like, well, firstly, like, if God exists and he is who he says he is, then he can see right through your facade and he knows whether you believe or not. You can't fake a belief to kind of get into heaven, right? You can't pretend to be Christian. God knows whether you believe or not anyway. So there's no point trying to fake it. But I said to someone recently, I said, like, okay, let's say I'm wrong, and when I die, from my understanding of the Bible, everyone goes to heaven and you're judged at the pearly gates, right? And if your name is in the book of life, you get to go through to heaven, or else you go to hell if you're not in the book of life. And I'm like, okay, what if I was wrong and there was an afterlife and I was being judged? And I'd be like, I would look at Moses or Jesus or whoever's the person judging me, and I would say, I looked for you as hard as I possibly could. I wasn't trying to run away and live a life of sin. My life didn't really change after I became an atheist. It was the same life. My habits and everything didn't change. I just wanted the truth. And obviously I was wrong, but I looked as hard as I could for what was good and what was true. And if you want to send me away, then so be it. But I did the very best I could, and you can see my heart and you know that. And so That's what gave me a lot of comfort when I was doubting as well. I was just making sure my heart was correct and my motives were correct. And it wasn't just because I wanted to run away and sex, drugs, and rock and roll or whatever, like I wanted to pursue truth. And it just gave me comfort to know that I can only do my best. And if the God is good, he'll understand that. I hope he would anyway. So that's kind of like the whole Pascal's wager. And I was like, the Pascal's wager doesn't fly for me. I'd rather just honestly seek what I feel is true. And obviously I'm going to be wrong on things because no one's perfect, but just be open. And life's interesting and the whole subject's interesting. So it's just good to learn. And anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, and I guess to Mark's explanation of his other group is you don't actually have to have a religion to be a good person and behave yourself. Like you're not going to become a sinner or go out and do horrible things, murder people, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
just because you don't have a religion.
I think one thing for me is, look, actions have consequences.
Yeah.
And if you want to go do drugs or quit your job or this or that, fine, but all of that has consequences. And it doesn't matter whether there's a God or there's a not. There's still a way to moderate your behavior, do you know what I mean, long term. And you can't just be an arsehole because you lose all your friends and you get locked in jail or whatever if you do dumb stuff. And so, you don't need a God to haul in your behavior and be a good person. Like we all get along. We all got to learn to live with each other. And so it's pretty easy to figure out that, develop some moral principles based on just getting along with each other, having a productive, flourishing society. You don't need God for that. So that's why there's no point going off the rails, because it's not going to end well for you. It doesn't matter whether there's God or not. Reality punishes you enough if you do something stupid. So
yeah. And you've got no illusion that you've got some kind of bank account, you've banked a certain amount of good girl or good boy points that you can draw on and be a bit of a dick if you want to occasionally. No, there's nothing like that. You are what you are, and you probably get what you put out into the world sometimes. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess I sort of have a sillier question then. Thinking about the first 3 videos that you have put up, you do mention Hitchens, you mentioned Richard Dawkins, but we do see at present more examples of Christian thinkers and speakers who shared that you are also considering where the atheists are going wrong. I guess I'm kind of curious, what might you recommend some of our listeners? What they might want to read in terms of, sort of emerging atheist thinkers. Because obviously Hitchens is dead. Dawkins is in a very different reputational position now than he was, say, 10 or so years ago. He's now culturally Christian. So who might our atheist listeners be interested in reading to help them answer these questions?
To be honest with you, I don't even know if I can answer that question because I haven't read a lot of atheist stuff, to be honest with you. So Richard Carrier, I read his book, Something in Goodness, which was really good. I really appreciated that. But I think the listeners can't see this. I got about 60 books behind me on my bookshelf, and 90% of them are Christian apologetic books. Because for me, I find it much more valuable, and I learn so much more by reading what the opposition has to say. If you claim that you've got bulletproof glass, this is probably the worst thing to say on New Zealand Skeptics, to be honest with you, is just to read Christian books. But if you think that you've got bulletproof glass, what's the best way to show that you got bulletproof glass? You pick up a gun and you shoot it and you try and break it, right? And so for me, I was like, okay, in the last 10 years, I'm like, I don't believe, but I really want to understand the Christian argument. And so I just kept reading Christian books and kept reading more and more, a lot on epistemology, which is like faith and how do you come to know things and what is truth and what is belief and things like that. And so that's shaped me more than atheist books, to be honest with you. I read Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion while I was a Christian, actually, and that did nothing for me. That's not because it's necessarily a bad book. I was just pretty brainwashed back then. But YouTubers like Alex O'Connor, obviously, Cosmic Skeptic is what he used to be, is a brilliant mind to jump online. I've followed Rationality Rules as well. He's got an awesome logical brain on him. So yeah, I would probably recommend, there's some great YouTubers. I don't know, who reads books now? I think a lot of people do, but I've stopped reading them because I feel like I've ingested enough that I want to start giving back, to be honest.
Nice. Okay, so I have a 2-parter question, which is, firstly, what is your target audience? Who are you aiming these videos at, do you think? And related to that, your current audience, because I see there's already been a bunch of feedback on YouTube in the comments, which there always is, but what kind of feedback are you getting from the audience that you've currently attracted as well?
Yeah, so I suppose my target audience is Christians, because that's where I've come from. But to be honest, anyone who's religious, because I speak in many terms and broad terms, so it would be relevant to most religions. But I'm going to talk about Christianity because that's what I know. My target audience is also atheists, because I just feel like in the next episode I've got coming out, actually, which will be live. It's going out this Saturday, so it'll be live once the listeners are listening to this video. It just talks about the 5 definitions of faith. It's a pretty neutral video. It's not really challenging Christianity or not. It's just saying, hey, there are a bunch of different ways that we actually use the word faith, and people equivocate on them, or they kind of switch definitions without realizing it. And it's confusing for everyone. And it's hard to progress discussion or debate when you actually have different concepts in your head about what faith actually means. And so it's good for both Christians and atheists if you're interested in it, especially this video 4 that's coming out is good for both. And I do want to start, I'll go back to Bronwyn. You were talking about, I've mentioned a lot of Christian people in my first 3 videos, right? I haven't talked a lot about what atheists believe. And I think the first step to recovery, if you're an alcoholic, is to admit that you have a problem, yeah? And so my first video especially was just like, hey, there's some pretty big contradictions on how people are using the word faith in Christianity. Like they kind of go back to in debates with atheists, they're like, faith just means trust, just like you would trust science or you trust the chair you're sitting on. That's just what it means. And then they go back to church and they sing, oh, faith rise up, oh, heart believe. And I'm like, well, that's not what you're preaching or what you're talking about in this atheist Christian debate, right? And so they're much more loose with faith back then in their church. And so it's just, my audience is for anyone who is seeking truth, really, Christian or atheist. Of course, my video is going to challenge Christians more, but I've got one in the works, probably about 4 or 5 videos away, that is going to spook a few atheists as well. But you can just subscribe if you want to hear that. And I think from there, my target audience is, as I said before, just the popular level. And I think it's a challenge for myself. Even more technical, tricky topics, I really want to communicate them at the level of my 15-year-old or something like that. And I think I can. It's just hard work to do it, but you can get there just so that I can reach as many people as I want. And just create, it would be stupid of me to say, if I'm doing this for, 10 or 15 years or however long it takes, I'm not going to convince everyone, right? And I'm not going to figure out, oh my gosh, Jared's proved that God doesn't exist. That's never going to happen, right? But if I can just progress the discussion a little bit more and we can start all being a little bit more intelligent and understand each other's position a bit better, so we can actually find more, what is the core problem between Christian and atheists? Is it just that there's not enough evidence, or is there something deeper than that? And then what is that deeper thing, and pursue that? I think just would be better for everyone.
Okay, and the second part of the question, your current audience, YouTube comments are well known as being a cesspit of just horribleness. But having looked through your comments so far, I think you found some Christians, you found your target audience then, but some respectful conversation going on, and you properly engaging and responding to people. How do you feel that's been going so far?
It's been going good, but the reason is because I started the YouTube channel 3 weeks ago. And I put it on my Facebook page. I have a lot of Christian friends on my Facebook page from my past, right? A bunch of them came over and watched the videos. And so most of the people who have commented, to be honest, are people that I know personally. And so they're going to be polite because they know me. It's not just keyboard warriors that are just randoms who are just bashing me. It has been very polite and constructive because it's, I'm still small, I'm still growing. Part of me is also I feel like I've got pretty thick skin, and I'm secretly looking forward to some of the haters and what they're going to say. I'm going to enjoy that. So looking forward to it.
Oh, I wish you luck when it all changes gear.
I say I've got thick skin, and I think I do, but at the same time, it's never been tested, so who knows? So be nice.
Yeah, I can imagine the more likely thing is that you just get bored of responding to the haters and just stop answering them after a while.
Well, I've been posting clips on TikTok, and that's where you just get random people giving back stupid answers that don't even address what the video was about. It doesn't really matter. It's pretty lighthearted on TikTok, so there's no point trying to engage anyone on that platform. But yeah, I'm going to get a lot of pushback. And end of the day, if you're passionate about something, you'll put up with the obstacles that are in your way to get where you want to go. Do you know what I mean? It's just part of the job, you could say. Just accept it and that's fine. Probably the only other thing to say is like, yeah, I think my heart for this channel, and like it'll come out in the next probably 10 videos or something, because I've kind of earmarked like roughly what I want to talk about. Like I'm not just blindly just picking random subjects, but I think for me, like, and hopefully it's fresh content. It's not just rehashing like evidential arguments like fine tuning and evolution and how do you get something from nothing, because that's been talked to death, you know. But I think for me, the last 10 years has been more about, and I suppose this is what I find interesting, but I'll give you an example. So if we're debating morality in the Old Testament and some of the atrocious things in the Old Testament, right? Sometimes, like I think Frank Turek does this sometimes, and he's like, yeah, but you're not even in a position to make a moral claim because you don't have anything to ground your morality against. So you might say that's atrocious, but atrocious based on whose standard, right? And the Christians claim, well, God is our standard. He's our objective, unmoving good, capital G good. Therefore, we can at least have morals, right? That's their claim. And for me, I'm like, Christianity is not just that there's not enough evidence, although that's, I feel, true, right? There's not enough evidence to believe in a God, but I feel like it's actually illogical. Like when you go to the very core, it just turns into absurd arguments. And that comes down to truly understanding what faith is, and faith is not just trust, even though the Christians say, oh, it's just trust. It's way darker than that. And it's not blind faith either. It's something else. And that's actually what it'll be live by the time this podcast comes out, video 4. 5 definitions of faith. Definition 5 is a bit of a dirty one. Not dirty, it's just dark. So yeah, I think for me it's just what is the core thing that separates Christians from atheists or non-believers or humanists or whatever you want to call them. And I don't think it's just a lack of evidence. I think there's something deeper, and I really want to find that. And hopefully in the next 10 or so videos, that'll all come out. So that's kind of where I'm going and what I'm passionate about. And we'll see where it goes. Hopefully it grows, and it will. I've just got to persevere because YouTube it's slow, right? It takes time for the algorithm to pick you up, but it'll happen. Yeah, that's a bit of me.
If we could give you any kind of suggestion from our small, insignificant podcast, it's that if you just do it because you want to do it and do it because you want to get the stuff out there, like I deliberately do not pay attention to the numbers. I don't care about our number of listeners. I hope it's big. I hope it grows, but not being dissuaded if in any given week it drops or it's small, because we're not doing it for the numbers. We're doing it because we want to get skeptical information out there. We want it so that if anybody finds this weird pseudoscientific thing and they type it into Google, that one of the resources we hope they find is us. And from that, they learn that it's nonsense and they don't get ripped off or get sucked into something weird. We're trying to help people, and that's what we're here for. And so the listenership to an extent doesn't really matter.
And a lot of the stuff's evergreen content as well. We're not talking about the latest sports game that happened on the weekend, which is irrelevant in a week's time. A lot of this content we're still going to be talking about it in 1,000 years, right? And so, you know, although I might make it up on my YouTube channel now, it'll be still getting views in 5-10 years. And so I totally don't mind how long it takes.
You make me want to cryogenically freeze myself just to see what Christianity looks like in 1,000 years. I could hardly imagine what that is going to be.
It'll still be here. It'll just evolve. They'll never give it up. Like there's
I'm sure it'll be weird in ways that we could never imagine. So I guess the last thing is to let our listeners know where to go and watch your videos, which is youtube.com/ at Unholy Light is the easiest URL, or just go to YouTube and search for Unholy Light and it'll pop up pretty quickly. Yeah, the videos are really well done, really enjoy watching them, and I have subscribed. I don't often subscribe to channels, but given that you are going to be regularly putting out content and I know there's always going to be something interesting to watch, I do want to know when your new videos come out. So I'm looking forward to watching them as you progress and work through all the problems of Christianity.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on here and talking about this. So it's good. Thank you for taking an interest.
Are you worried that the name is going to put off Christians, that the unholy part, do you think they're going to be worried about that channel?
That's a good question. So because I wanted to make this YouTube channel for 10 years, right? And so I had a notepad of what names do I want to call this channel. It was going to be just Searching for Truth was the name. But then I was like, this sounds a bit weird, but like Telecom changed to Spark, right? Changed their branding from Telecom, which is telecommunications, right? Which is just very logical, right? And that was kind of like Searching for Truth. And I was like, there's no emotion in that. There's no conflict in that. It's just a bit bland and stagnant. And so I finally came across, Unholy Light. Unholy because it's not Orthodox Christianity or any kind of Christianity. But light is because like I genuinely have something positive I want to share. It's not just that the channel is not just about debunking Christianity. It's about saying, hey, look, I think, encouraging atheists or people that lack belief or whatever you want to call them, saying, hey, look, you can actually have a positive belief and you can actually not just debunk Christians or say you guys have funny beliefs or stupid beliefs or whatever, but argue a case for yourself. And so that's what light is. It's saying, hey, there is a positive argument that I've got to make in worldview for a world where there is no God in there. And so that's what Unholy Light means to me and why I like it. So if it rubs people the wrong way, well, that's just how it is.
Yeah, for a lot of these things, band names and brand names, once you've learned it, you don't think about the word in context. You just remember the thing that it's been assigned to. Okay, well, let's hope that Christians can look past that and will dare to watch. Maybe it'll be a little dirty secret that they're watching the Unholy Light channel.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. So,
Righty, well, thank you so much, Jared. Can you show us some toes, Mark?
I could show you my toes, but I'm not sure you want to see them. But yes, you are you are alluding to an article. So I wrote a couple of articles. One is that's the more interesting one, the more fun one.
Oh, I think we can talk about both. We still have time, but I want to hear about the toes first.
All right.
I think it's just funny how people are, asking for evidence. Show us the
toes. And this one, it was a church member. So this was basically a church in the US. It was called James River Church. And it had this healing event, which was broadcast to multiple campuses. They have more than one church location. And at one of these locations, there was a woman there who was in the audience. And then the call was put out from the main church event at the main center that they were going to have healing. And this healing was, I think it was called creative healing. They were looking for creative miracles. They were looking for people basically who needed something to happen in their lives, maybe a little bit unusual. And this woman, Kristina, she had lost 3 toes. And this is, atheists come out with this a lot. It's like, if you're going to do faith healing, stop making it all internal stuff. We want to see a limb grow back. And this woman, she fronted up here. She basically took off her shoe and sock, and she showed that her middle 3 toes were just stumps. And she asked for it to be prayed over so that her toes might grow back again. And apparently it happened. So basically, over the course of the next half an hour to an hour, supposedly everything came back. There are pastors that since then have talked to their flocks about how bone reappeared and then flesh started wrapping around it. And by the end of the evening, toenails were showing up. And this woman was fully healed. Now, as skeptics, alarm bells are going off, right? Toes aren't going to grow back. If they do, surely this is a clear-cut case of a miracle. And so basically people started saying, can we see the evidence? Can we see some pictures? That although the pastors were just saying, look, this is a miracle, trust us, some people at least were like, no, I don't trust you. I would like to see a picture. And one ex-member of that church set up a website, which is showmethetoes.com, basically chronicling this idea that they really wanted to see these damn toes. It's like, you can tell us as much as you like that the toes grew back, but nothing's quite as simple as just showing a picture. And at first, there was no picture, and then eventually one turned up. It looked like somebody had taken a picture after the event to chronicle this. And you guys must have seen the picture in my newsletter article. Those toes have not grown back. The after picture is not 3 fully grown toes. It is 3 stumps in the middle of her right foot.
So are they slightly bigger stumps, or is it just a different camera angle, or what's going on there?
Yeah.
Why?
No, they're not.
God,
so with
God
a bit
just
of
gave
sleuthing.
up halfway through.
Sorry?
God just gave up the healing halfway through and said, you can have half of your toes back, but I'll just stop the miracle there.
Yeah, maybe at that point she stopped believing or so. Why would you stop believing in the middle of toes growing back? I mean, that's where your faith is going to be the greatest. But yeah, somebody managed to find like an old grainy before picture from her Facebook account. I've gone back to her Facebook account and I cannot find it. She scrubbed everything before, I think, 2024. And this was back in 2021, I think. So unfortunately, I couldn't get the original, but it almost looks like it's taken from a CCTV camera or something. It's grainy, most of the colours washed out, but you can see 3 shortened middle toes in the before picture, and you can see 3 shortened toes in the after picture. So, oh, and also in the zoomed out version, I managed to find another version which has the other foot. The other foot, the toes are how you expect. So this isn't just a genetic thing where both her feet have shorter middle toes. Her toes look fairly normal, fairly average. But she was missing them. She still is missing them. This miracle didn't happen now that the after pictures come out. It's a little bit embarrassing for the churches, or it should be. They just carry on regardless. I looked into it a bit more, like what's going on with this woman. It's a horrific story. Her life, I say in my article, maybe they should make it into a movie. She's not a good person, but I also kind of feel sorry for her. So basically, she's had a meth problem for many years. She was part of a meth drug dealing ring as well. So she was selling and supplying methamphetamine as well as being addicted to it. The reason she lost her toes, it sounded like they were shot off, but it turns out they weren't. Her ex-husband, he went round and basically shot both of them with a shotgun, killed the wife, or killed the new partner, and his ex-wife shot in the stomach twice. She was in a coma for 3 months, and during that 3 months she had kidney problems, and because of that they had to chop 3 toes off, so the 3 middle toes, I guess, possibly went gangrenous or something, and they had to amputate. And she's been done for a bunch of drug-based offences. She lost custody of her child. Her child eventually, like as a teenager, committed suicide. So it's a really messed up life. And the reason she was in the church is because I think she'd been to prison. She was out and in a halfway house. And I'm not sure she's even a believer, but it sounds like she was at the church to try and convince a judge to let her leave the halfway house and go and live in the community. So she was just going to church to try and prove that she was a good person, not because she was a believer. The more I delved into it, the more I'm like, I can't believe that all of this has happened to her. I think I genuinely feel sorry for her because from what I understand, meth is a horrible drug. And once you're in it, it's very hard to get out. But you really still shouldn't become a meth dealer. I'm also not surprised that she lies about toes. She's probably half of her life is lying about one thing or another. So lying about toes growing back, it probably wasn't much of a problem for her morally to do this. I imagine it came fairly naturally to her by that point. But the churches were gullible. The churches, they should have asked to see the toes. They should have, taken photos, got a proper doctor in, but from what I can tell, the doctor that looked at her toes was the husband of one of the women that prayed over her. So he had very much a vested interest in claiming that the toes had grown back because the reputation of the church is based on it. So he obviously didn't do a good check. He didn't take any photos. He didn't publicize anything. And the church believed him rather than just asking her to take a sock off. And that's all they needed to do. And they didn't. It's a weird story, as I said.
I have a similar story, actually. So back in church days, we had faith healers that come through, like they're just traveling and they're faith healing. And so the word goes out the week before. And so the church basically doubles in size, the congregation, because there's this faith healer coming. Anyway, we have a long-standing member of our church, Mr. Garrick is what I would call him when I was a kid. And he had one leg shorter than the other. And so he would just wear a special shoe which had like a 1-inch thick sole on it so that he could just walk normally, right? And that's just how he's been his whole life. And so that's just pretty normal. So he goes up the front to get prayed for and he sits down and start praying for his leg. And I was sitting down the back so I couldn't see what was happening, but there was this big shriek and Yahoo! Oh my gosh, I'm healed. And so he took off his shoe, or had his shoe next to him, I suppose, maybe he'd already taken it off, and he just threw it down the back of the church in celebration, going, I don't need this shoe anymore, my leg is growing like an extra inch. And so we're all like, wow, really? Oh, this is pretty cool. Okay. Anyway, next week he walks into church with his shoe on again. So nothing happened. So I don't know what he felt in the moment, but nothing happened.
Interesting. Yeah, so I know, like in my article, I linked to a video from Darren Brown, who actually does the leg lengthening thing. And there's more than one way to do it, right? So
and
if
he's
you want
an
to
atheist, right? He's an atheist, not even a Christian.
No, but
tricks.
Yeah, he does these tricks to show how it's done, and he does it convincingly enough. Like, he does this for being a psychic and being a Christian healer in 2 different shows where he pretends that that's what he is, and he gets people to genuinely believe him, but then he stops and says, no, it's not true. Look, this is how I do it. For the leg lengthening, he prays over someone whose legs aren't the same length, and he just pulls the shoe off of one of them slightly, just at the heel he pulls it off, and with the right camera angle, it looks like it's slowly growing until it's the same length as the other one. But the other way I've seen of doing it is a parallax one. If you hold somebody's 2 legs out in front of them straight and you just move them left or right, as you move them, one will appear to lengthen or the other one shorten, whichever way you look at it. So you just swing people round until their legs have moved enough that they both look the same length. And a camera shot from above, it's a miracle. But as you say, the next week they're right back to how they are, because nothing's actually changed. Nothing's been healed. Like I always hear the leg lengthening as the big, this is what Christians always use. But I've never seen it in church. You have actually seen it being done.
Yeah, well, I wasn't, not with my own eyes. I was sitting down the back, but yeah, I was in the congregation as it happened. So, nice. But you're kind of like the next week when he walks in with his shoe, you're just a bit embarrassed to ask him because it must be embarrassing for him, and so you kind of just ignore it and pretend it didn't happen. Everyone goes back to normal.
The lack of cameras just puzzles me. Like, you just, like, everyone's carrying a cell phone around. You've got pictures of their cats and high-res pictures of their lunch. And then suddenly, an alien spacecraft passes overhead or someone's toes grow back and nobody has cameras. Nobody has cell phones.
Yeah.
How convenient.
So my other article, just really quickly, I think this was the one that was more interesting to skeptics because it has a good lesson in it, was this Christian preacher, Shawn Bolz. And Shawn Bolz has been doing the evangelical circuit for like 25 years or something in the US. But there was a point in, they reckon about 2013, the people that are looking into him, and he announced that he'd had this new special anointing from God, but he's a prophetic reader. He's someone who prophesies over people and gives them like words from God. And in 2013, with this new special power that God had given him, he started becoming very accurate at his readings, and accurate in the way that a psychic does. But he'd be in a church with maybe few thousand people, and he could throw out names of audience members, and he knew who was in the audience. He said that God had given him these messages, but he'd throw out not just their names, but their addresses, their birth dates, and a few other details, maybe friends that they had, children and spouses. And when you watch one of his prophetic words, it just looks like a hot reading. Like, to us skeptics that know what a hot reading is, know how it is to go and look someone up, open source intelligence, OSINT, when you just go online and look for someone. Apparently 2013 is the year that Facebook introduced its Graph API and its ability to basically connect different things together more easily. So Facebook suddenly was a lot richer for the links it gave you when you look someone up in Facebook to take you to more information and friends and life events and things like that. So it looks very much like he was using mainly Facebook to do what he was doing. Apparently people had heard that he had been asking if he was going to an event, either he would be able to see everybody that had RSVP'd, let's say if it was a Facebook event, or if it was an event with some kind of private RSVP, or if they didn't have any RSVP, he would talk to the church and say, look, can I get a list of who's coming? Can I get a list of all your church members? And he was quite insistent that he needed this list without explaining why. And obviously it's to look people up. Now, he has been undone. He has been basically, it's really weird. Like, a lot of Christians seem to have accepted that, oh, look, all of this information is publicly on the internet is enough of a gotcha, which to me it isn't. Like, that's not proof. That's That's pretty good reasoning for skeptics, because we know that psychic powers are very unlikely to be real, and God talking to people and giving them this information is very unlikely to be real. But it's not a slam dunk, like saying, hey, he knew this person's date of birth, and their date of birth is on their Facebook account. It doesn't prove that he looked it up on Facebook. The thing that did get him, though, and in this 6-hour video I watched from a conservative pastor called Mike Winger, who was looking into Shawn Bolz and Bethel Church, the standout bit for me that I think we should be able to use for some psychics as well is when they have misses. So when a psychic misses, often they try and paper over it. But with a hot reading, you shouldn't have misses. Everything should be a hit. So when a miss has happened, something interesting has happened. And for Shawn Bolz, sometimes what happened was he would call out someone's name and that person was sick. So they were meant to be at the event, they'd RSVP'd, but in the end they didn't turn up. And how God doesn't know this, how God doesn't know that this person's going to be sick and not be there, I don't know. But the more damning one is when he does a reading for someone, like a psychic reading, but he's doing his prophetic word, and he throws out a detail for someone who is in the audience, and it's wrong, but it's not just wrong, it happens to match somebody else with the same name. And there's an example in this video of Mike Winger's that to me was just, it was just really nice to watch, where basically he was trying to dress up this reading. So he talked to this person called Kelly Rhodes, and he talked about how he was thinking of his friend Kelly. God had sent him a message of his friend Kelly on a road, and he's like, is there a Kelly Rhodes in the audience? Sure enough, Kelly Rhodes was there. He talked about how her mother was Doris and how they were really good friends. And then he said he was getting Psalm 105 and he was getting the word slaughterhouse. The idea was that this must be an address. Psalm 105 is probably 105 slaughterhouse. And so he threw this out, and the woman just goes, no, that doesn't make any sense to me. And he says to her, just think about it, probably will. Just research it a little bit. It's not a big deal, but have a think about it. It's probably relevant. We've seen psychics do the same thing, where their misses, they try and convince the person being read for that they're the one in the wrong and that psychic is the one in the right, which is just mean. But in this case, if you do a search for Doris Rhodes in Pennsylvania, which is where Kelly and Doris Rhodes come from, it turns out there's another Doris Rhodes who is elderly who lives in the same area. Totally unrelated to the Kelly and Doris Rhodes that he's talking to in the audience, but this other Doris Rhodes from Derry, Pennsylvania, lives at 105 Slaughterhouse Drive. So he's screwed up his research. He's basically found the wrong Doris Rhodes and has thrown out her address confidently, and it's a total miss. And to me, this is really good evidence that that's what he's doing, because like his process is broken down here.
When you're doing a con, like eventually cons are going to slip up and they're going to get it wrong, and that's when you get caught.
Yeah. I mean, these people are sloppy. The issue with this one is apparently he's been fairly sloppy from the beginning, but the church has always papered over it. Bethel Church, which is his main church, and other ministries that he's been talking to, they've just looked the other way because the audiences love it, because the audience think it's an amazing thing. And this is not even the half of it. Like, on top of this, because Shawn Bolz has been a very popular prophet in evangelical circles in the US, he's been able to employ staff members to work with him. And when they go on the road going to different churches, they share a room. So he shares a room with his male staff members. And it turns out he likes to get naked in front of them, and he likes to masturbate in front of them. And again, the church decided to ignore this. They kept being told of, like, employee after employee making accusations that were all very similar, of the same kind of behavior. And the churches just ignored it. And when they stopped ignoring it, when it was too much to ignore, they quietly stopped inviting him to their church. Nobody put out a message saying, this guy is hella dodgy. Nobody let any of the congregations know, or other churches know. Apparently, privately, a few of the church leaders that had already kicked him out were talking amongst themselves themselves, but none of them wanted to admit they got it wrong. I mean, how could you? Like, you are godly people running a church for thousands. You've invited this prophet in to talk. You talk in glowing terms about how amazing he is, but this has all come from God, right? God let you know that this man was anointed and that he should be allowed to preach to your flock. What does it mean if you were wrong? It's not just your reputation, it's your connection to God that comes into question. So I'm not surprised that a whole bunch of these religious leaders hide it, because it speaks volumes about whether they actually do have a connection to God, which obviously for us is no, because nobody does. But their church members are going to start questioning it if they like put all their money on someone like this and it turns out that it's a bad bet, and that this person, as I said, not only is a cheat but is also a sexual abuser. Like, the guy's pretty creepy. He's now married with 2 kids. I think this was a recent thing. I think this is like part of his damage control, is if I marry and have children, I don't look like I'm gay. And obviously it's fine for us that he's gay, right? Just don't treat other people like that. I think he has a lot to come to terms with in his life, Shawn Bolz. But the church, again, it's the church that has enabled this and allowed it to continue. And there's a lot of damage that can come out of this. It's really, really unfortunate.
They'll just rationalise it, going, well, overall they've brought a bunch of people closer to God. They didn't know about all the stuff going on in the background, and so even though it was fake, it's a good thing and the net benefit for the congregation, and you can just see it all going on.
And there's a valid argument to be made, like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So there was a bad prophet, right? He was a dodgy person. It disprove Christianity, and of course it doesn't. And so there'll be people that will just be like, okay, well, he was just a cancer and finally we got rid of him. It doesn't dissolve what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. And of course that's correct. But there'll be a lot of people that will just be like, okay, why am I a part of this? And they will, like, yeah, some will go, but some will stay.
Yeah.
But also think about Benny Hinn, who, he was the one who was infamously captured by James Randi for doing hot reading, and he kept
Peter
on going
Popoff?
for years.
Peter
Popoff. He was caught by James Randi doing the same thing. And he went off I think he was still preaching for a while after that. So, being exposed as a fake doesn't really change anything.
So Popoff's audience dropped off in the aftermath of Randy exposing him on national TV, but it didn't disappear. Over time, he changed. Like, the last thing I heard about him a few years ago, he was doing mail order holy oil, where they basically send you the holy oil and then try and charge you $30, and they won't accept the holy oil back. You can't mail that to them. You just need to pay them. So he was getting hold of church databases and then basically blackmailing people into sending him the money for this oil that they didn't want. Him, I think, and his wife and his children were all on 7-figure salaries running that new scam. And it's like, he'd been thoroughly debunked and he's still able to scam people. It's really unfortunate.
Want to believe something, you find a way to believe it, eh?
It's a weird mindset that people aren't that interested in evidence. They want to believe. And some people, when they find out that something isn't true, they just go on to the next thing to believe. It's like, what's similar to what I had before that hasn't had these problems exposed? I'll go and jump on that one. The interesting thing to me, apart from anything else in this one, is Bethel Church and how they handled it. They handled it in a Sunday service where Chris, one of their 3 main guys, stood up and basically blamed the Christian Mike Winger who made the video exposing this. So totally shooting the messenger. And then a week later, all 3 of the main leaders stood up in front of the audience, in front of the congregation, and just totally apologized. Somebody had pointed out that was a really tone-deaf way, totally wrong way of dealing with this, that they were damaging the church by trying to protect themselves rather than thinking about the congregation. So their second response has been much better. It still felt like it was manufactured, like, people had workshopped everything that they were saying, and they'd figured how much they were willing to accept culpability and how much they weren't willing to go any further than that. And I guess maybe they had lawyers on it and all this kind of thing, but they made it look all touchy-feely and heartfelt, and there were lots of tears. But I have my suspicion that in the long run, it's probably not going to make Bethel Church change that much. I think it's going to be lip service and damage control and enough to keep the congregation coming through the door. And so they've done this as a way to not lose money in the end. Like, the fewer people that walk through the door, the less money they get. But I think institutional change for these kinds of churches it's never going to happen. Like, if they start evidence checking and background checking everybody that comes into the church to preach, they're not going to have many people allowed through the doors. Like, most of them doing something dodgy, whether it's prophetic or whether it's the faith healing. Like, a lot of it is, it's not evidence based. There's nothing proving that it's right. It's all based on just not looking too closely and wanting to believe that it's happening. And yeah, it would not be good for the church to actually thoroughly check these things.
It's also Bethel Church, and Bethel Church in and of itself has a history of dodgy decisions that don't even involve backing up a minister who is doing hot reading.
Yes, and a bunch of ministers they have backed up, that not just Shawn Bolz. I think it was Bethel Church that had the miracle gold dust that came out of the air conditioning ducts in one service, and it was seen as a miracle rather than that somebody had just put glitter in the air ducts before the service. Apparently it was gold from heaven. People have kept hold of it because it was thin slivers. Over time it's gone silvery because it's just plastic covered in something gold colored. That's all it is. It's not actual gold. They thought they could get away with doing that. They thought they could trick their congregation into thinking God had blessed them with all this like gold glitter flying around the room. Who knows who made that decision?
So I have an idea. It'll be a video in the future, but I'm like, what would convince me that Christianity is true? And like, I don't know why churches don't take me up on this. I'll put it out there. Maybe if someone's listening, if you're a church and you're listening, just create an app or a website, which is a prophecy website. And any prophet from any religion, whether you're a mystic or a Hindu or Buddhist monk or Christian, whatever, if you have a prophecy, put it online, timestamp it, and then it gets marked or how vague or specific and a time. Yeah, does it come, is there a timestamp or is it just an indefinite thing? And then over time, like employer independent statistician to collate all the data. And over time, a true prophet the cream's going to rise to the top, and there'll be a significant prophet who'll be like, hey, your prophecies are far greater than the control group. Something's going on here. Why is the Christian prophets way more accurate than everyone else? Why doesn't someone do that? That would be a pretty powerful way to prove that prophets are real. Churches have got the funds to create that app, advertise it to everyone on, every wannabe prophet, and be like, okay, let's try it.
Wouldn't that be nice? I loved Hitchens' answer to this one. He was asked, what would it take to make you believe in God? And he started off by saying, I would need God to appear in front of me and tell me to my face that he's real. And then he said, actually, no, not even that. If that happened to me, I would walk to the nearest hospital and check myself in because I would assume I've got a brain tumor and it's making me hallucinate. He's like, I'm not sure there's anything because I have a whole lifetime's worth of evidence that he doesn't exist. And anything that he does has to undo all of that counter evidence. And I'm not sure what he can do by this point in my life that will undo all of that. And I thought that was a really good answer. Like, even this vision of God should not be enough, right? Your brain can be fooled. Your brain can do weird things. You shouldn't trust it infallibly.
Well, people have visions from other gods and other religions. Does that mean that their God is true? Like, no, yeah. Maybe it's just a false vision. None
of these groups are bringing the evidence. It's just their claims versus other people's claims. And all we're asking for is evidence. Like, show us the data. That would be good. That would be a really good start. But it never happens. Then they're not even interested in, you say, as collecting it. No Christians are doing this. None of them are trying to prove it in this way.
Yeah, they could totally try if they really believed that they were a prophet. But
yep. They're just asking you to trust or have faith or whatever the term might be.
Pray on it.
Pray on it hard. All right. Well, I think we've hit the end of our episode. Again, Jared, I just want to thank you so much for coming in. It's been great to have you on and to hear your thoughts. And I am really excited to see where your YouTube channel is going to next. But before we say sayonara for the next fortnight, we still have some items on our membership corner to go through, so bear with me, listeners. Wellington Skeptics in the Pub, we are officially back at the Intercontinental Hotel. You can find us inside the lobby lounge, which is inside the hotel, and that'll be starting from 6 p.m. on February 20th. Auckland Skeptics in the Pub will be at the Dyson Fork on Tuesday, March 3rd, starting at 6:30 p.m. Early bird tickets are on sale for our 2026 conference with our special guest, The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, coming all the way over from the USA. Go to conference.skeptics.nz. The website's a bit bare bones at the moment, but it does have a link to our Humanitix website, and that's where you can buy tickets. Finally, at 7 p.m. on March 1st, we will have our special general meeting to ratify our new constitution. This year, the government is requiring all incorporated societies to register under the new Incorporated Societies Act. For us, that has entailed adding a couple of new mandatory sections to our Constitution. There's really no space for quibbling about wording, but we still need all the yeas and nays from our membership. Members will have sufficient time to review the Constitution on our website. And if you are a current financial member of the Skeptics, you should be receiving a notification regarding the SGM in your inbox. And also, just an annual reminder for listeners who are also members of the Skeptics, this time of year is when many of you will be receiving your reminders about your annual subscription. This is automatically deducted from your bank account, so if you have any concerns or questions, please reach out to our treasurer, Tim, at treasure@skeptics.nz. Otherwise, if you have any comments, questions, queries, kudos, or concerns, please email us at news@skeptics.nz or podcast@skeptics.nz. So that's it for us for this episode of the Yeah Nah podcast. Ka kite.
Until next time.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.